Bismillah.
Shukran. Assalamu alaikum. So, Brother Ismail, I think, so we're talking about digital public infrastructure, with your experience in the humanitarian sector. What do you see you touched on some of the tech you're using, but what do you see some of the challenges across not just your organization, but across all, let's call it humanitarian organizations, where we think solutions may be needed?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So just to paraphrase the question, in terms of the challenges that we see in the humanitarian space are largely around, I think, a lack of coordination amongst the different organizations. And I think something like tech naturally can bridge that gap very easily to avoid things like duplication, cost overruns, etc. Some of the other challenges in the humanitarian space would naturally be, we operate in areas that are war-torn, lack of connectivity, etc. So I think, Brother Ismail, as I respond to this question, I just want people in the audience to just reflect on a typical day in the life of a refugee camp, because I think that would be amazing. So no power, no connectivity, what would be a tech solution? So as a finance guy, obviously my tech aptitude is quite limited, but I'm thinking things like solar-powered tents, solar-powered digital libraries, and I've made a list of wish lists that if anyone's keen to indulge me and help, I'd be very happy to share some of that, inshallah.
Shukran. Ziaad, so you spoke about the 4IR, and we're talking about digital public infrastructure for the Ummah. That doesn't exist per se, right? But if we think about the companies that are popular, I think someone mentioned 4 companies, rule our lives. You could say that they are now the governance layer that used to be played by other organizations, right? So based on your experience on 4IR, as an Ummah, what do you think we need to, as the critical sort of key points where we need to own or either invest in to ensure our independence?
Yeah, thanks, Ismail. Look, I think it's quite a complex question because ultimately there's so many different pivots. So I think as an Ummah, what we have to remain is relevant. And the first thing that comes to mind is that you have to have the right skill set, because before you can even think about, impacting an environment or developing innovation or doing anything in that regard, you have to have the right aptitude, you have to have the right skills, you need to have the right, environment within which you're operating. So that would be the first portion. The second portion is obviously taking a step back, understanding the data and what the opportunity is. So as an Ummah, in order to step forward, in the highest level of generality, if you think about tech, you have hardware, software applications, essentially plus skills. So which portion of that do you want to take part in, and what is the opportunity in that? If you're playing in the digital infrastructure, it's an extremely expensive game, right? If I give you an example, the investment in GPUs is a couple of 100 million rand, not just millions, right? So is that a space that you want to play? If you have the money, yes. But the reality is that find those niche areas where you can really make a pivot through innovation and become relevant and essential. And utilizing that, get into an environment where your essential nature of your product or services can be replicated and scaled, because then you're not limited to boundaries. And through that, your enterprise can grow, your reach can grow, and through that, the Ummah becomes a lot more relevant because your social impact as a result of scale and value is immense.
Shukran, Jazakallah. Wasim, just on, you mentioned open source, right? And Ziaad has mentioned, finding a niche. And what I'm understanding is, at times we may not be able to compete due to the capital outlay of the big ChatGPTs and these guys, because we're sitting in South Africa, we don't have the talent. You mentioned that you'll leverage open source quite a bit. Can you maybe elaborate on how we as an Ummah could leverage open source or piggyback on or your experience on open source?
Jazakallah, Ismail. So I think there's two things. One is in terms of the use of the application, just to the refugee camps. We're working with the United Nations and to look at the safety and the risk mitigations to perhaps people who don't want to be registered, people who want to come through the border, people who are not receiving their passports because of delays and still want to be a citizen in this country. So holistically, I think as a Ummah, we can contribute even in a non-Muslim-led country as South Africa. Then to the point of open source, it was built on top of giants. Like we're not relearning how a passport works or how a smart ID works. This stuff exists. However, we are trying to Africanize it and decolonize that. And, I actually represent civil society organization and I don't work with government, I'm not a public servant. And we're funded by the UK government, which is another interesting one. But they don't like when we say that. So although the tech we're using is open source, like in the example of Umar radiallahu anh, you can take existing systems which are efficient and make it work for the Ummah where needed. So you don't have to start from scratch.
Shukran. I got some questions from the audience. Just really quick, Ziaad. How do we maintain control over our data? Because if you think about it, a lot of these platforms are exploiting our data. So, there's concepts of data sovereignty. So how can we sort of take back some of that control?
Yeah, thanks very much. It's a really interesting question because a lot of the time when people want to get into something, they give away all their rights and they give away all the consents, right? Which means that you open up the world to say, please help yourself. So that's the first level of control, is how much do we personally want to give up? Then if you take it one level beyond that, is in an enterprise or a company, how do you control your own data such that you maximize the outputs? Often what happens is that you'll then work with other software solutions, etc., which allows you to get into a much broader data lake. And therein, you're also giving up certain rights. If we then elevate the discussion beyond an organization and take it into a country level, for us in our data centers, we have 3 here in South Africa, 2 in Africa, and we're busy with another 2 North Africa. The fundamental thing that we are doing now, through the investment of the GPUs and our partnership with NVIDIA, is to try and get the supercompute power in our data center, in our country. Because what that means is 3 things. Number one, when you work with a hyperscaler, your data leaves the country and resides somewhere else. You pay for the data cost to go up, you pay for the data cost to come down. Therein lies a number of risks. Not only about latency, but also for the cost, but also the control. You end up in a position of where you could be sabotaged through data ransom, because what happens tomorrow through any decree by anybody that says we're blocking the data? What happens to your business? If you go into the morning and you log onto your computer and you can't see anything, you don't know who owes you money, you don't know who you owe money, you don't know who your customers are, what do you do? Because your data is somewhere where you have zero control. So this is the reason why we've done the GPUs for processing the data in a world of AI in the country in order to benefit the outputs. And we can talk a lot more about this. I know we're under time pressure, but data control is something that you have to take very seriously, because people talk about the natural resource being data. It is a fact. The people that control the data have the insights. Without the data, you can't run AI. Without AI, you lose the game, right? So let's just think about what's really going on.
Shukran. I think
especially when US East 1 goes down.
Yeah.
Then we'll have some backup.
So everything is, they say everything is in the cloud except when US East Coast goes down, whole internet's down. 30 seconds.
30 seconds it is. Brother Ismail, if I can exploit the 30 seconds by just running through the list, please feel free to stop me. But I think it would be remiss of us as an organization not to talk about what we think are some of the dire tech needs. And inshallah, if it sparks an element of creativity or action, I think we would have done really well in this conference. The first is to get what we'd call a humanitarian volunteer registry. Even in the tea breaks, we're getting people coming up and saying, I've got the skill set, how do we do it? So, as I mentioned, we've got our stakeholder relationship manager. We're still pretty manual in the sense that we're saying, send us an email, we'd like to talk to you. But I think it sparked the thing around us having a humanitarian volunteer registry, a global one. And then an aid supply chain tracker, making sure that organizations that link into this piece of platform, I hope I'm saying it correct for the tech guys, just to know who's doing what on the ground and to share some lessons learned. In terms of zakah administration, we're all aware that the most impoverished get turned away at times due to admin challenges, bogus beneficiaries, etc. We need your help. We need to be able to optimize the zakah database. Please chat to us. And then lastly, I won't run through all of them, but creating some offline learning facilities for the most downtrodden. And I'm thinking children that have nothing. There has to be a way that we can impact their lives through the use of tech. Jazakallah khair.
Shukran. Brilliant. Jazakallah. Brilliant ideas. We've got the app. I don't know if anybody is logged on, but here, if you're thinking of an idea, maybe log on and we're going to invite you onto the stage to chat about it at the end, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.